Released in October 1987, this is where it began. Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. The Rogue Trader disappeared, but over the years, you know, this has formed the foundation of what is now Warhammer 40,000 and that entire hobby and that fantastic universe. So I'm going to have a flick through this. I'm going to pick out some of the key things that I think amused me or have been interesting over the years that have changed. So, you know, just basically bits and pieces of facts that hopefully will interest you, and we can see, you know, how this book led to the whole kind of Warhammer 40,000 hobby, and basically a large part of the success of Games Workshop. Now, this is my third copy that I've ever had in my life. I started in the early 90s, so I did have a relatively new one, although often the spine would give way and it would fall apart. So I'm really hoping while I do this, it manages to hold up. Starting with the front cover, it's a pretty iconic scene here. It's a last stand from the Crimson Fists, which basically makes them the first ever Space Marine chapter. Straight away, we open it up. Got a front cover. Obviously, Rick Priestley writes this. Not much to say here. We've got this iconic text here, the all-important, but the universe is a big place, and whatever happens, you will not be missed. This one's signed Good Gaming by Rick Priestley. That's his kind of standard signature. And then straight off, we've got some chapter symbols here. A few of them are recognisable. We've got the White Scars, we've got the Space Wolves, and a lot actually haven't changed much at all. And then there's some that I've just never seen. I guess that's an orc symbol of some sort. Blood Drinkers, Soul Drinkers, then Blood Angels. And there's the Ultramarines. Moving on, we've got the contents. So quite a who's who of wargaming as we go down this side and see who's involved. Most of the people you'd expect. One that really catches my eye in all of this, I mean, obviously you've got John Blanche, you've got Jervis Johnson, you've got Rick Priestley, and then you have, where is he? Just Pete Cantor he becomes the Crimson Fist character Pedro Cantor. So a bit of trivia for you there. It's a book. It's divided into sections. You've got combat, the battle for the farm, equipment, the age of the Imperium, the advanced gamer, and a summary. So straight off, it talks about the type of dice you might need. Got those here. Interestingly, some more. So you want at least one of each 4-sided, 8-sided, 10-sided, 12-sided, and 20-sided dice. Basically, it uses the same dice from Dungeons and Dragons, which is it's kind of fun going back. Then you've got the scenery that you might need. Lots of polystyrene scenery here. And then over the page, we have our first lot of troop characteristics. So these are the old profiles. This is the basic human. You've got movement 4, weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, wounds, initiative, attacks. And then you have here, you've got the leadership 7, intelligence 7, cool 7, willpower. This becomes the one statistic, which was leadership. Now that would last until what, 8th edition? I think it's disappeared now. On the left here, you've got the chapter of the Dark Brotherhood, which I've never heard of before or since. Yeah. Over the page, we've got some colour, lots of different races. Now, one thing I'd say here is compared to other games from the 80s, Games Workshop really pull out the stops with Rogue Trader. It's not entirely full colour, but where there is colour, I think they do a really, really good job. And it's the same with the layout. The layout is fantastic. It's a really good looking book, even nowadays. And there's lots of examples as well to help you with the rules. So a few kind of key things here that have changed over the years. You used to be able to roll a 7. Here you go. As you roll to hit, the maximum you need, if you need a 7, then what you do is you roll a 1d6 and you need to get a 6. You then roll another d6, you need a 4 plus to get a 7, a 5 plus to get an 8, or a 6 plus to get a 9. You can really accumulate some modifiers when shooting there. Other key changes in hand-to-hand combat, you use a table now rather than just rolling to hit. Now, where's it gone? Here it is. What you do is you get the attacker's weapon skill and you go against the defender's weapon skill, and that gives you the roll that you need to hit there. You just roll a number of dice equal to your attack. Anything over that is a hit. And this basically disappeared in 2nd edition, so it doesn't last very long at all, but it is one of the key rules from Warhammer. Here is an old picture of Lehman Russ, who looked absolutely nothing like we imagine him. Then we have the original Eldar. So the original Eldar are more kind of pirates in Rogue Trader, and they stay like that until the release of the Warhammer compilation a few years later, and that starts giving them aspect warriors, it gives them the avatar and a whole load of other options. There's then a story here about some feral warriors who are hoping to prove themselves and to be taken into the stars to battle amongst the stars alongside the heroes of old, really catching that idea of the Space Marines recruiting from these death worlds there right from the start. Go into vehicle rules. So vehicle rules are a lot more complicated than they are now. You can see here you've got to worry about turning circles, and there's a lot more attention needs to go into how you're actually going to maneuver your vehicles. And dreadnoughts. So dreadnoughts at this point are really basically men in robot suits. They're not the kind of fighting sarcophagus that we're used to nowadays. This is one of my favourite quotes in Warhammer 40,000. Contact with alien races always renews one's faith in humanity. It is my belief that foreign travel narrows the mind wonderfully. It's actually based on a quote from G.K. Chesterton, and they've really twisted it here. G.K. Chesterton does say how foreign travel narrows the mind, but he then goes on to say how we should therefore learn to celebrate our differences. It's fair to say that is not something the Imperium will be doing anytime soon. Right, we come round. We've got a bit on robots. You used to actually have to program robots, a bit on designing characters. Then we get to psionics. So psionics are more like magic spells at this point. The one psionic power, so you've got a page here that shows all the psionic powers. One psionic power that's really stuck around is Hammer Hand. Then we go on to mutants. So you basically roll on this table for mutants, and some can have a big effect in the game. So there's things like wings, which are essentially like getting a free jump pack, but others are just a bit odd. So there's some where your facial features are upside down, or it is possible just to be a head with arms and legs. All these mutants are kind of outlandish in that kind of 2000 AD way. And then we have a simple point system. So the point system basically provides you with a formula to work out how much a creature costs compared to a basic human. So you've got your basic human stat line here, and then what you do is, depending on how much better you are, gives you multipliers. And then when your character becomes a lot better than average, there's like an extra multiplier, so they're even more expensive. And then you've got the points for all the different weapons that they might have. I do wonder how long the studio would have used this point system for. Did that do them for quite a few books or not? So the Battle for the Farm is the scenario that's in here. It's basically Marines taking on a load of orcs. In fact, if I go to the back of the book, you can see that they actually provide us, let's find this, right, you've got play sheets and stuff, an Ultramarines brief, an Orc player's brief, and then you've got counters that you can use instead of using miniatures. So you can get playing almost straight out of the book. Obviously you need dice. Now, as well as having two players in a game of Rogue Trader, it also has a Games Master, and this allows for, there you go, in fact, what the GM must do. And this allows for random events to happen in a game. You don't see it much in kind of modern sci-fi games, like you don't see it in Warhammer, you don't see it in Star Wars Legion or anything like that, but you do see it in quite a few historical games, and a lot of historical gamers I've played with quite like the idea of random things happening in the game. Personally, I cannot stand it. And in fact, sorry, just while I'm at the back, there we go at the back, here is you can see how much models have kind of appreciated over time. I mean, this is from the late 80s, but you can see here that a box of Imperial Space Marines, that's 30 Space Marines, plastic ones, or 30 Orcs, will set you back £9.95. Both sets contain 30 models. The Marines, in fact, are the original plastic RTB01, first ever plastic Marines. So you have the Battle for the Farm, your little scenario. Now there's loads of weapons here. You'll recognise quite a few of them, and some of these will be seen on the tabletop for many, many years. One thing that's very different is the type of support weapons. So if I skip through here, you can see some of these weapons disappeared and came back in kind of more recent years as well. Now where is he? You've got the old power gloves. There's a Rogue Trader. Right, here we go. So we've got heavy weapons, distortion cannons, lasers and the like, rocket launcher. You'll see a lot of these weapons sort of disappeared, and then they came back with the Horus Heresy models, which is a really, really nice kind of blaster and blast there with Forge World. There's bio-wire bombs that basically add more plants to the battlefield. Where have they gone? And then there's also, yeah, here we go, support weapons. So bio-wire bombs. And then there's also, you can even have, holographs. So these paint words or pictures onto cloud cover and can be seen by anyone on the table, and basically are a way of demoralising your opponent. And there is this wonderful thing here. Strike the first rune upon the engine's casing, employing the chosen wrench. Its tip should be anointed with the oil of engineering, using the proper incantation when the auspices are correct. Strike the second rune upon the engine's casing, employing the arc tip of the power driver. If the second rune is not good, a third rune may be struck, in like a manner to the first. This is done according to the true ritual laid down by Scotty, the engine seer. Oh, Scotty, there we go, that'll be a Star Trek reference. A libation should be offered. If this sequence is properly observed, the engine may be brought to full activation by depressing the large panel marked on. So basically, just turn it on. So we've got lots of vehicles now coming up. We've got the crawlers, the Vincent Black Shadow, which is a real bike from the 1940s. I'm not sure how that got snuck in here. There's the original Land Speeder somewhere. Where's he gone? The Juggernauts, which are giant vehicles. There's the Land Speeder stats. And the equipment section, here we go, is the original Land Raider. This would also be a plastic model at this time. And we've got a breakdown of the armour. And then some robots there. You used to have to program robots to actually see what they could do on the battlefield. And then there's miscellaneous equipment. So miscellaneous equipment's really good. There's a lot of an assortment of general kind of equipment, which adds a lot of character to the world as well as the game. So you can have grav chutes, teleporters. There's even web solvent for if you find yourself stuck in a web gun. They're a lot more specific from what you see nowadays, and I suppose it's more suitable for those light rogue trader skirmishes than the massive battles that we tend to play nowadays. The Age of the Imperium is the background basically of the galaxy. Opens up straight away talking about warp travel. Now at this point warp travel isn't inhabited by chaos yet, but there are monsters called enslavers that do live in warp space. In fact, there's quite a few other creatures that do live in warp space. It's still not somewhere you want to go. And then it talks you through the structure of the Imperium, which hasn't changed at all really. The Emperor is still sat in his golden throne, and his will is carried out by the Adeptus Terra and the Inquisition. The departments are still the same. It does feel like there's a bit more of a religious slant to it all, and the leading priest can actually even order the Space Marine chapters around. So we've got Custodes here. There's the Emperor in his golden throne, the Adeptus Terra. And then there's the Dark Angels here, I first mentioned with Lionel L. Johnson. I've mentioned him in another podcast. And there's a whole ritual here. You then go through the different types of human warriors. So the Space Marines, the Inquisition. And then you get through, so we've got the Astra Telepathica, Psychers, Navigators. So the Navigators are in houses, kind of more like Dune. And the housing family is obviously very rich and responsible for shipping people safely through the warp. The Legions Astartes, who are the Space Marines we know and love. Bit of smiling one there. I don't know how he snuck through. And you've already got your list of some Space Marines there. In fact, I think all of those chapters are still around. Oh, and it was the Blood Drinkers at the beginning. I couldn't place. Here is a map of the Fang, the Fortress Monastery of the Space Marines. This has changed quite a bit. It's not so... sorry, of the Space Wolves. It's not so full of Vikings as it is nowadays. A full breakdown of it there. You've got the Imperials, and you basically come through. You've got the Rogue Trader himself. Lovely full colour spread here of Space Marines. Assassins. So assassins here can shape change. They're kind of sent on missions. They've not yet been divided into like the Vindicar, the Colexus, the assassin kind of houses. Another picture of the Emperor of the Golden Throne. And then we get through to abhumans. Abhumans are stable mutants that serve the Imperium. So actually now we've got beastmen, we've got halflings, ogrins and squats all in here, which is a good variety, and quite a few really for a society that says they suffer not the unclean to live. Oh, this marvellous ogrin quote, dib dib dib, dob dob dob. Then you've got Eldar. So Eldar are basically space elves, but the framework is laid out for the future. They live in craft worlds rather than planets, and they exclusively use hover vehicles. Then you have Orcs. So Orcoid space. So Orcs are also described as violent. They basically hate everyone, but they hate squats most of all. He's kind of drawing on this fantasy Orcs hating dwarves. But their technology is described, it's not as advanced as other races, though they still have warp drives. It's not quite as barbaric as it is nowadays. And then your Orcs in space, they also have Gretchens. Again, they don't quite have the same comedy value with the grots, but they are going to become grots. One race that doesn't really exist in the game nowadays is the ancient Slann and their inheritance. Very similar to the Slann of Warhammer. They keep to themselves. I think they're basically here to help with the sales of the Warhammer Slann miniatures. A large part of Rogue Trader is designed so you can use other Citadel miniatures. If we then move on, we've got Jokero. So Jokero are space monkeys. Well, they're orangutans, so I think that makes them apes. And they're actually included in with the major races here. They're pretty cool, and they can actually rebuild technology in a game, and they can collect smaller items and build bigger ones. They've fallen somewhat nowadays, so basically nowadays they're an Inquisitor's buddy. And then we come over to Tyranids. So, Tyranids aren't dissimilar to the Tyranids we know and love nowadays. The Tyranid warrior does look a lot like a termagant, but the Hive fleets are still out there with their bioweapons trying to destroy everything. And, oh, I've just gone over it. Where is our last page? Zotes. There we go. So, Zotes are here. The giant creatures are described as a slave race of Tyranids. They remained part of the Tyranids until I think 3rd edition when they killed off, but they came back in the Blackstone Fortress game, or at least one of them did. We then come into a section of kind of warp creatures, denizens of the warp. Chaos again doesn't get a mention, but it does say that the warp's not very safe for psychers. The astral hounds you get, these are like Lovecraft's Hounds of Tindalos. In H.P. Lovecraft, these hounds appear out of corners. These basically appear from anywhere on the battlefield and will attack psychers specifically. You've then also got spectres, enslavers, vampires, warp entities and zombies, all of whom work in basically the same way. They're very much about enslaving or possessing people on the battlefield and turning them against it. The type of creature that you very, very much need a games master to be able to run. And we've also got these giant wasps, which again is Sakinuan, who again infect your brain and possess you. Then we've got the creatures here. So there's a good range of alien creatures. I'm just going to kind of pick a few of the key ones out, the more interesting ones. So you've got the Amble. Again, made a bit of a resurgence, I think, in Blackstone Fortress. It's especially inspired by the Umber Hulk in Dungeons and Dragons. There's Bouncers. Bouncers are giant balls that bounce around the table. I guess you represent them with a ping pong ball. If you've seen John Carpenter's film Dark Star, that features a very large inflatable alien in a spaceship. Pretty sure that's the inspiration for these. The old Catacan Devil is first mentioned here, basically a giant multi-legged scorpion. It's kind of cool that Catacan is a death world right at the start. You've then got the Catacan Face Eater. Again, a brilliant monster. It's basically a very angry flannel. Crotalids over here. These are basically an excuse to be able to use plastic crocodiles in the game. A lot of these creatures, basically you can use your toy collection. I mean, you can see you've got dinosaurs. You can get your plastic dinosaurs out with this one. You've got the classic Gene Stealer. The design has changed a little over time, but you can see, although there's not like a connection with the Tyranids right now, they are still very angry and multi-limbed, and they are ferociously good in close combat. There's Groxes, Girinxes, your standard horse. The Terror Squirrel. The Terror Squirrel starts out life for a few generations as a cute, fluffy squirrel, and then it becomes a monstrous, carnivorous creature. They fly, they're savage. I just think it's just wonderful, this idea of the background that there's this kind of mostly time cute fluffy creatures and then they become massive monsters. And then you've also got flora, so you've got plants. You've got the Catacan Brainleaf. Once again, the Catacan Brainleaf is keeping up with the theme of Catacan trying to kill you. If the devils and flannels aren't enough, the Brainleaf then possesses and takes over you. There's a Rubber Moss over here. Rubber Moss is basically a large area of rubber terrain. As you go over it, you'll bounce off. Now we get on to, we've got a creature chart to generate random encounters. There's a plant chart to start filling out the battlefield. This great piece of art here of all the different races, or rather all the Imperials and Squats, and there's an Eldar just gathered around what is basically a gaming table. Some great art here. A lot more of a 2000 AD feel than modern 40k there. It does, as you go through this, reference the Eye of Terror and Hell's Reach. There's a lot in this part of the book. It starts looking at fast dice throws to speed the game up, random movement. There's different rules for scenery. There's a quote from the Tyrant of Badab. Although my guards may sleep and ships may lay at anchor, our foes know full well that big guns never tire. So the Tyrant of Badab is Huron Rakarth, but I guess he wouldn't be Huron Rakarth until Forge will get a hold of him in the early noughties. And you've got rules for planetary landings. It's pretty awesome to see that this rulebook. The rulebooks have always been packed full of stuff. You know, this is something that's gone on through the years. The rulebook is just packed full of good stuff. You've got a plot generator. Now, there's basically different tables. So you can have reprisals, investigate new world, investigate oddity imperial planets, quell rebellions. There's quite a few there. And then there's, you know, a decent paragraph that goes with each of these. My absolute favourite one, where is it? Let's have a look. All these different ones. I mean, it's full of stuff. Here we go. An administrative error has dispatched 2 identical forces to an alien-controlled world, both of identical orders to destroy all armed resistance on the planet. I just think, what a wonderful, wonderful reason. You know, if you ever need to justify a fight when you're playing your mates with a bit of blue-on-blue kind of action, there you go. It's covered. Then you've got subplots. Some of these just introduce extra creatures, a few extra plots for you to follow. Section on collecting your army. Look at these Eldar models. I think that might be a young Rick Priestley. Certainly these guys are from a while ago. How to prepare your metal models, your plastic models, how to undercoat them, how to paint them. You know, real stuff that we probably consider quite basic hobby stuff now, but it's all in here right at the beginning. And I think that's part of the reason that 40k has done so well. It was sort of just made for success. A bit on modelling and painting. Big picture of the guys who are all involved in this. Some caricatures there. There's a few kind of extra appendices here. So you've got a rules summary. And you've got this marvellous note. So you've got a note from the author on language. If you've listened to my other podcast, I talk a lot about the language. And most of the time, so many of the titles of the ancient institutions organisation presented as Latinised English, such as the Adeptus Terra. And it represents an older tongue, itself a development of 20th century languages. So it's not necessarily Latin as such. Then it's... You've then got a note on the technology here, which talks about, again, this is quite important for how everything works, is that everything is so far ahead of us that, you know, it's 40,000 years in the future. Things like heads-up displays and computers are about as innovative as stone circles. So these are, you know, what our technology is quite primitive, but it appears to others still, you know, this stuff feels like alien, it feels like magic almost. He's basically said, you know, it's impossible to speculate on the certainty of technical developments in the next 40 millennia. So they've made a few assumptions. So there's lots of dangers. People are mentally very different for the day, have a different way of looking at things, which 20th century ideas of efficiency and morality are irrelevant. They actually talk about the STC templates in here, like right from the start. Here we've got one of our Sisters of Battle. They talk a lot about the army here and how the preachers... to have it. There's not as many Sisters of Battle in here yet. Yeah, standard template constructs, power generations. So lots there. And then there's just a very, very simple timeline, which basically discusses how the Emperor appears from the Age of Strife. And you've got some nice little summaries. You've got play sheets, you've got the templates, you've got your summaries, the stuff from the Battle of the Farm that we've already seen. So that is a Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. Yeah, I mean, hopefully you can see from that there's loads of great stuff in there that's really gone on to influence the game, you know, since it came out, and has probably really helped. Well, I mean, we know it's helped the direction of Games Workshop and made it pretty awesome. So yeah, so thank you very much for listening, and you know, please like, subscribe, let me know what you think of this. I'm going to try to get hold of some of the other old books as well, see if I can get hold of like Slaves to the Darkness and the Warhammer 40,000 compilation and talk through those.